For nearly every day of 2024, Chinese Coast Guard ships hovered just off Japan's Senkaku Islands, a record-breaking presence that left Tokyo staring down the longest incursion in modern history. But why here, and why now? Beyond the daily patrols, the contest for these uninhabited rocks could redraw Asia's maritime boundaries. The answer begins with the seas themselves. Stretching across a patch of the East China Sea, the Senkaku Islands stand isolated, 5 small islets and 3 bare rocks scattered over a sea area of 4,740 square kilometers. That is an expanse nearly 6 times the size of New York City, surrounded by waters that draw lines between Japan, China, and Taiwan. The closest Japanese territory, Ishigaki Island, lies 170 kilometers to the southeast, while Taiwan sits the same distance to the west. Even Okinawa's main island is more than 250 kilometers away. Patrolling this remote zone is a daily test of endurance and logistics. The Japan Coast Guard maintains a fleet of at least 10 large patrol cutters at Ishigaki, each over 1,000 tons, with more stationed at Naha to the north. These ships are built for long hauls and rough seas, but the distances mean that every sortie, every trip out to intercept or observe can last hours, sometimes days, before a crew even sights another vessel. Around 600 personnel are assigned to these operations, rotating in shifts that stretch the limits of both men and machines. On paper, the task sounds straightforward. Monitor a cluster of uninhabited islands, respond to approaching ships, and enforce Japan's claimed sovereignty. In practice, the crews face a relentless operational grind, with Chinese government vessels detected in the surrounding contiguous zone on 355 days in 2024. The pressure rarely lets up. The Coast Guard's daily logs fill with entries, distances covered, contacts made, warnings issued. Ships must be ready to launch at any hour, often shadowing Chinese flotillas or positioning themselves between foreign hulls and Japanese fishing boats. The patrol area itself complicates the mission. The waters are open, with few natural harbors and no permanent infrastructure on the Senkakus. Refueling and resupply require careful planning, and weather can turn quickly, forcing crews to adjust routes or extend their time at sea. Each cutter carries its own supplies, but the isolation means that even routine maintenance or medical issues become major logistical challenges. For the Japan Coast Guard team stationed at Ishigaki, the assignment is more than a posting. It is a year-round cycle of vigilance. The record-setting tempo of 2024 has pushed both ships and crews to their limits, transforming what began as a border patrol into one of the most demanding maritime operations in the region. In 1895, as the First Sino-Japanese War drew to a close, Japan's cabinet formally incorporated the Senkaku Islands into Okinawa Prefecture. Japanese surveys had found the islets uninhabited and apparently unclaimed, invoking the legal doctrine of terra nullius. This administrative move, backed by official maps and records, became the bedrock of Japan's claim. China, meanwhile, maintains that the islands are historically tied to Taiwan and should have been included in the territories ceded under the Treaty of Shimonoseki signed that same year. These opposing interpretations laid the groundwork for a sovereignty dispute that would persist beneath the surface for decades. After World War II, control of the region shifted again. The United States assumed administration over Okinawa and its surrounding islands, including the Senkakus, as part of its post-war governance of the Ryukyu Islands. For nearly 30 years, the United States used these territories as strategic outposts in the Pacific. In 1972, the Okinawa Reversion Agreement transferred administrative rights back to Japan. Washington, while restoring control, deliberately avoided taking a stance on the island's ultimate sovereignty. Instead, the United States clarified that the Senkakus would fall under the United States and Japan Security Treaty, obligating a joint response to any armed attack. China and Taiwan both objected, arguing that the reversion disregarded their historical claims. The island's legal status, once a technical matter, now became a flashpoint in regional politics. The 1970s introduced a new dimension with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Under UNCLOS, coastal states can claim an exclusive economic zone, spelled EEZ, extending up to 200 nautical miles from their shores, granting rights to fisheries and potential seabed resources. Japan treats the Senkakus as islands capable of generating their own EEZ and continental shelf. Legal scholars referencing UNCLOS Article 121 question whether these uninhabited rocks can sustain human habitation or economic life. If not, they would be classified as rocks, entitled only to a 12 nautical mile territorial sea, not a full EEZ. China's public statements emphasize historical title and maritime rights, but remain vague on whether the features themselves generate an EEZ. With no international court ruling, the legal status remains unresolved. Control over these barren islets could shift national boundaries by hundreds of kilometers, affecting access to fisheries and potential oil and gas reserves. The ambiguity is more than legal theory. It shapes daily patrols, policy decisions, and the livelihoods of those who depend on the sea. China's Coast Guard did not always operate at this scale or with such authority. In the early part of the decade that began in 2010, Beijing began merging several separate maritime enforcement agencies, including customs, fisheries, and border police, into a single, unified China Coast Guard. By 2018, the new China Coast Guard had been placed under the People's Armed Police, giving it a direct command link to China's military chain of command. This institutional overhaul allowed the China Coast Guard to deploy larger, better equipped ships and to coordinate more closely with the Navy. In February 2021, China enacted the China Coast Guard Law. The law authorizes China Coast Guard vessels to use all necessary means, including weapons, against foreign ships in waters that China defines as its own. Legal experts note that this provides explicit cover for more assertive actions, even in disputed zones like the waters around the Senkaku Islands. The text does not limit enforcement to uncontested areas, and Chinese officials routinely state that the Diaoyu Islands and their surrounding waters fall under Chinese jurisdiction. Analysts describe the China Coast Guard's approach as a classic gray zone campaign. Ships operate just below the threshold of open conflict, maintaining a near constant presence in the contiguous zone. These patrols are not simply routine, they are designed to normalize Chinese authority, challenge Japanese law enforcement, and pressure Tokyo to accept a new status quo, all without crossing into outright military confrontation. Japan's answer to the relentless Chinese patrols is clear and concrete. New patrol ships are joining the fleet at Ishigaki and Miyako, each designed for long deployments and rapid response. The Miyako-class vessels, at 3,500 tons, bring more endurance and firepower than their predecessors, with the latest hull, Hiroshima, set for delivery in 2026. Construction has also begun on a multi-purpose patrol ship, nearly 200 meters long and 30,000 tons, able to operate 2 helicopters at once, making it the largest vessel in the Japan Coast Guard's history. These investments are not limited to ships. Tokyo has committed to deploying armed drones over the East China Sea, aiming for persistent surveillance and the ability to react in real time. Defense white papers and public statements from Japanese leaders leave little doubt. The waters around the Senkakus are described as inherent territory, and the government pledges to defend them with both new technology and a visible daily presence. The message from Tokyo is unmistakable. Japan will not be edged out by pressure or routine. Fishing boats from Ishigaki used to work the waters near the Senkakus without hesitation. Now, many local captains report staying away for weeks at a time whenever Coast Guard standoffs intensify. Cooperative leaders in southern Okinawa describe days when the risk of close encounters with Chinese or Japanese patrol vessels is simply too high, and fishermen shift their routes or cut trips short. There is no official tally of these no-go days, but local accounts and regional news suggest the disruption is real and recurring, with stretches each year when the core fishing grounds lie empty. The pattern has drawn attention far beyond the islands. Under the security treaty between the United States and Japan, Washington has repeatedly confirmed that an armed attack on the Senkakus would trigger Article 5 commitments. Joint statements from both governments now mention the islands by name, leaving little doubt about alliance coverage. Analysts point to several clear warning signs that risk is rising: the construction of new China Coast Guard bases closer to the area, deployment of larger and better armed cutters, and the appearance of Japanese drones dedicated to maritime patrol. Frequent United States Navy and United States Coast Guard sailings near the islands, sharper language in alliance statements, and reports of coordinated People's Liberation Army and China Coast Guard maneuvers all serve as concrete indicators to watch. For communities in Okinawa, these signals are not just abstract policy, they shape daily choices, livelihoods, and the balance of stability in the East China Sea. Today, China's record patrols and Japan's rapid response lock the East China Sea in a tense daily standoff. Each maneuver tests the boundaries of international order. As technology raises the stakes, the contest isn't just for islands, it is for who shapes the rules of Asia's future. What's your take?